Welcome to Revenue Rehab, your one-stop destination for collective solutions to the biggest challenges faced by marketing leaders today. Now head on over to the couch, make yourself comfortable, and get ready to change the way you approach revenue. Leading your recovery is modern marketer, author, speaker, and chief operating officer at Tegrita, Brandi Starr.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Revenue Rehab. I am your host, Brandi Starr, and we have another amazing episode for you today. I am joined by Kurt Uhlir. Kurt is a sought-after marketing leader that's been called the king of scaling. He has built and run growth for early-stage companies, as well as those over $500 million in annual revenue, and assembled teams across 6 continents. In the past few years, he's been an executive with a public company and coaches dozens of mid-market companies. In addition to giving numerous keynotes and podcast guest appearances about growing companies of all sizes with high-achieving servant leadership and modern marketing. Welcome to Revenue Rehab, Kurt. Your session begins now.
Thank you for having me.
I am excited to have you. When I read your bio, I was like, across 6 continents, what about Antarctica?
There's no freelancers or full-time employees you can hire. So
I'll give you a pass on not covering all of the continents just based on that fact.
Elon Musk may be changing that. We may be able to do that going forward.
This is true. The way we're having global warming, Antarctica might become a beach at some point, but that's neither here nor there now. Before we jump into our topic today, I like to break the ice with a little segment I call Buzzword Banishment. So tell me, what buzzword would you like to get rid of forever?
I'm actually really sick of hearing artificial intelligence or AI right now, especially from people that have no idea what it actually means.
Yeah, it is. It's like AI has been great in its own respects, but yeah, it is right now. Everybody has become an AI expert and everything. I was looking at a conference and it was not an AI conference, but it was like every session is like AI this, AI that, AI this. And it's like, okay, yes, it is so important and we do need to understand it, but you can like hit a wall of like, okay, can we talk about something else?
Yeah, I know CEOs at 2 mid-market public companies that in the last 12 months went to everybody that reports to them and the next level down, requiring that everybody come back within weeks of the 2 to 3 AI initiatives that they are not only looking at, but are implementing in every one of those departments. Like, not that it doesn't have a place in accounting, but when things are working, maybe what are we considering versus like, what are you implementing right now? So they shifted the entire strategy just to say, tell me what AI you're doing. And I'm like, well, that's one way to do it. It's not the right way, but it's a valid approach.
I'm like, it is a way, not necessarily the right way, but it's a way. So I can promise today we're not going to talk about AI and artificial intelligence, no robots, no chat GPT, etc. So now that we've gotten that off our chest, tell me what brings you to Revenue Rehab today.
So I'm doing a lot of coaching right now that's really coming back down to, I think we're going to talk about it, but a servant leadership versus other styles. And so how many people are held back, especially like AI and other things. Things are changing. There's uncertainty right now in economies, and how people are approaching things tend to hold back their revenues from what they're trying to actually do, but also they're slowing the companies and actually in some cases increasing more uncertainty than they would like.
Okay, yeah, and leadership and how it impacts revenue is something that I don't think is talked about enough. And so I love that we are going to jump into that. And before we do, I believe in setting intentions. It gives us focus, it gives us purpose, and most important, it gives our audience an understanding of what they should expect from our conversation today. So tell me, what's your best intention? What would you like people to take away from our discussion?
Yeah, for me, I think the thought is there's only two styles of leadership. There are flavors underneath there, but there's an authoritative leadership style, which at the end of the day says, hey, do what I say exactly how I say to do it, or there's the door, you're fired. And then there's a servant leadership approach, which is a very different approach. It says, hey, I've hired you for a business reason to help the company hit business outcomes. And my job then is not to tell you exactly what to do. It's to do that somewhat, but it's to serve you, to help you better accomplish the outcomes the company has hired you to do. And when you do that, it changes from being a micromanager, which people don't like to think they are, but almost everybody is. And it shifts them to talking about how do they coach, train, and trust their employees.
Okay. And so that is really helpful. And I want to begin our conversation really with the end in mind, because as an executive, leading people is a significant portion of the role. But at the end of the day, we are really measured on company performance. And especially for those that are leading marketing, there is so much more pressure and focus on how we are driving revenue. And I know that you see a connection between leadership style and the ability to effectively drive revenue, drive meaningful customer engagement, et cetera. So I'd like to hear you to put those two together to, kind of lay the foundation of why this is a topic that people really should pay attention to and do kind of some self-assessment here.
Yeah, so my approach to marketing is kind of almost, it's a flavor of the Steve Jobs approach. My belief is marketing encompasses everything from somebody who's never heard of your brand or company until they've been a loyal customer for 10 plus years. That means does the umbrella cover what a salesperson says to a client? Yes. Does it matter the press releases? Of course. Does it matter what onboarding and customer success teams look like when things come up for renewal? It encompasses all of that. And so often from a marketing perspective, to your point, we're pushed for like, what are marketing qualified leads? What are sales qualified leads? And people stay in their little narrow area, as opposed to saying, hey, some cases maybe we're handing over enough leads, but sales isn't closing. And the fault isn't sales. It's that we're setting the wrong expectations up front when somebody initially hears about our company or our brand. Or maybe we're doing all of that well, but the product, as it's being onboarded and they're teaching things, it's not fulfilling on the training perspective the way that the sales team and even the product team knows that it could be. And so from a marketer's perspective, I have to step out a lot of times and say, like, the servant leadership approach says, hey, I might be wrong about a lot of things. My head of revenue may be wrong about a lot of things. The product team, when they're talking and the product managers are talking, they might be wrong about things, even if it's worked really well at other companies. And so the servant leadership approach is entering almost every conversation with that concept of saying, I might be wrong about something. You might be wrong about something. Our goal is to hit these business outcomes. So let's be open to, hey, we all know that we're wrong about things, because we change our mind about things we were really right about 12 months ago. And so when we come in with a servant leadership approach, the idea opens us up to compressing the amount of time that it would normally take to find out you're wrong, to saying, hey, instead of taking 12 months to figure out this is the wrong product marketing fit, maybe we figure it out in 3 months. And so that's how I connect the two together. I'm always looking for, how do I compress that time?
Yeah, and I can remember early in my career reading a book about failing forward, and it talked a lot about, failure is inevitable. There's going to be things that don't work, and it's how do you fail fast and fail forward. And I do think as a leader, thinking about my early career, how I was influenced and leaders that I had, and then the leader that I aim to be for my team now, it really is making that space to be wrong, to try something and it not work, to, really be able to figure that out fast and pivot. And I do agree with you, like being able to be that kind of leader, you grow people so much more, because we all learn from those experiences of here's what we tried, here's what, didn't work. Where I would sort of love to hear, and I won't even say pushback, it's more so challenge it just to hear your thoughts, is where I have seen people who lead with more of that authoritative, do as I say, I know best kind of style, the thought process that I have heard is more, it's my butt on the line. The tenure of the head of marketing is the shortest in the C-suite. We don't have, we don't have time, we don't have space, we don't have the trust of the CEO, we don't have all of these other things. So I've got to lead with an iron fist, so to speak, and make sure that everyone is marching to the beat of the same drum. And so while I don't agree with those statements, it is something that I hear. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, great question and great pushback. I hear that as well. And so one of the things when I'm giving keynotes or a corporation brings me in to start talking to their leadership and mid-market managers is that person often, if you go and talk to them, they will think that they're actually making the lion's share of the decisions, that they know what's going on. But if you slow them down from that hard charging and you start talking through all the decisions are made, just even within marketing, that says, are you reviewing every email that's in the drip sequence? Are you yourself as a CMO reviewing? And you start walking through all of the decisions that their team is making, or especially if they have a larger team, their direct managers that they're managing, and you start walking through all of the concepts that are being made. Well, we have brand guidelines, but you might have 20 people in your marketing team that are interpreting those. Unless you're actually reviewing every one of those yourself, you're not making the decisions. And so this person that thinks, well, yes, is their butt on the line? Yes, but they think they're making 30, 40, 70% of the decisions. When you walk them through all of the decisions that take place on a weekly or even monthly basis, they very quickly realize they're not even making 1% of the decisions. And so while they think they're micromanaging, and they think they're putting in place all these SOPs, one of two things is happening. Either there's no flexibility whatsoever, and that's the case, that's how you kill sales and revenue, is you say everything has to sound like a robot, follow the SOP 100% to the clear with no decision making to yourself. Well, that's how things slow down. Or on the other side, your team is making these decisions, but they're scared to come to you because you're going to be the bottleneck. And you're going to be like, well, I can go to Kurt for this, but it's going to take 3 weeks to come back to me before he can give me a review of this. Well, that doesn't work from a timeline perspective when somebody needs to get a campaign out today. As opposed to that servant leadership approach says, look, I'm creating an environment where I've given very clear direction about what I want to happen. Well, do I want my team to push back on me if they feel that it could be wrong? Well, actually, yeah, because if I hired just a robot, well, there's ChatGPT for that. If I, but if I'm hiring smart people and I'm trying to train them, well, they might see something I don't. Even though I may need to still make the decision on it, I want them to come to me with that. Or I want them to say, hey, I need you to take a look at this. I had a head of customer success. She was wonderful. And we created this environment where she had no problem coming to me, which just said, I have this horrible customer that's going on right now. And can you take 35 seconds and read the email I'm about to send them? Because she knew she wasn't going to get her hand slapped if she got it wrong.
Right. And I think creating that space for your team to, one, be able to make decisions, within, everybody has their box of based on your role, your level, all these things, this is your lane. And when it comes to making decisions in that lane, you've got it. And also, again, feeling confident. I think one of the best feelings as a leader is when I have someone compliment something my team is doing that I didn't even know was happening. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, look, yes, that is amazing. Yeah. And it is because, and I'm totally patting myself on the back because I'm they felt empowered enough to take something from idea to market without having to involve me because it was in their lane. They felt it was amazing. There wasn't something I was needed for, because you're right. As a leader, we have so many things that are going on. Coming to me for everything is going to slow it down. Right. It just is facts. So thinking about this, and especially speaking, because I think I have my listeners are range from, CMOs who have been CMOs for decades and some that are just moving into that leadership role. And so I want to speak for a second to those people that are still a bit new in their role and having to start to lead a team. How do you as an individual really self-assess or evaluate how you're working with your team to see if you really are leveraging a servant leadership approach?
Yeah, great question. Some degree, I think, like, especially if you're early on, like, you have to put things, bullets on your agenda, on your agendas with your one-on-ones and with your teams to make sure that you're just covering topics, like asking that, what could I be wrong about? New in your career. I mean, I have to do that now. And heck, I've written thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of, articles on this at this point. And so it's like, I put that on the agenda for certain of my people. But I think that part of that is the self-assessment. It is taking 15 to 20 minutes once a week and just looking back and saying, hey, are my teams coming to me with questions that, to your point, that I didn't even know that they were working on some campaigns? Are they coming to me with gut feelings for things that they think might be wrong or I might be wrong about that they can't fully articulate yet? So that would be kind of the key to me. Because I mean, there's the hard driving boss where, as you kind of mentioned, like, they're pushing hard and they're intending to be the authoritative boss. But so many people, I'd say the vast majority of companies and executives I work with, they don't think that they're an authoritative boss. And if you talk to their team, they're like, he or she is so nice. But if you underlie this nice personality, they're still the authoritative boss. They just don't realize it. They think because they're nice and they ask how the weekend went, that they're not an authoritative boss. That's not what servant leadership is. Servant leadership is coming in every day and saying, hey, I want you to be successful in your job. How can I make that better? In some cases, that's backing away from that person. In other cases, it's saying, look, I'm having a problem with the copy that you're writing for social media and you're 2 levels underneath me. And so the next time you get in and do that, I just want to pull up side of you virtually or in the real world and do that with you. And you'll see how I'm approaching it and we'll critique that. And so you really can do that self-assessment to see, are people coming to you with problems like that?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I can remember a couple years ago, like, our executive team goes through, different sort of exercises here and there just to always reassess how we're leading, how we're keeping engaged teams. And one of the things that we started asking, like one of the questions we've kind of added into a rotation in our one-on-ones, is actually asking our team, where do you need me to lean in more to support you? And where would you like more autonomy? And I have found that question to be extremely powerful because I can admit early in my career, I was that nice but authoritative leader. And it was more the control freak in me that, wanted to make sure that things were done right. Not that I intended to be authoritative, but that was the way it came across. And I did have someone, say to me, like, I need space to just do my job. And it took me by surprise because I was like, what do you mean? Like, of course I give you space. Like, and so I had to really like step back and look at that. And I have found that because I'm so conscious of being more of that servant and being more helpful, I do lean back sometimes a bit too far. And so in asking that question, I have actually had my team to say, like, here's a place I'm not super confident. I really would love you to, if you would lean in harder and, almost like micromanage me in this little way so that I can grow, so that then you can, be able to step back and I'll be confident. And that's been a true eye opener for me because there are places where I'm like, had I not asked that question, I may have been giving them too much space.
Yeah, I love that question. For me, one of the things that comes up to the questions and also what's going on is I know, like, my nature is to want to control everything. I'm good at so many things. And so if I can do the work, like, is it better than perhaps even everybody on my team could do it? Possibly, depending on the team and the company I'm in at that time. So how do I fight that as well? Well, that's why I love tools like Trello or Asana or Monday.com, where it's like, as long as I can look in and see what's going on, then I'm confident that things are happening and I don't have to feel like I get involved as much. But also when somebody then asks a question or answers the questions you gave, well, then I could go back and look at things historically that they've been updating and putting in there as well. But it's easy for them to raise their hand at certain moments and just say, hey, I need you to go take a look at this. I'd like a little more help on this.
And that is actually a good shift in talking about more tactically what this looks like. Because I do like that as an example in having a project management tool or some sort of system where work is being tracked so that you do have that visibility without having to hover, so to speak. Are there any other tactical things that you would recommend that people consider or evaluate so that you can, be in this space of where you feel like you're in control, what's happening, if you get asked by your CEO or the board or whatever, like you've got your arms around it, but you are able to be, a leader that is more serving their team than, being the authoritative leader. Are there any other tactical recommendations that you'd have?
Yeah, so there are some tools that come in either if the company's running like a full kind of HR suite to do like OKRs and whatnot that'll do weekly reviews. But there's some really lightweight just apps you can bring into like Slack that just will prompt everybody like at the whatever time and day you want. So Friday at 3 p.m. it'll remind everybody to come just do a quick short summary, and you can structure the templates about what did you get accomplished this week and what are you working on next. It's a nice light way, and you can do that for the whole company or just for your teams as well and certain people. And I love that to be able to almost force everybody, including myself, to go back through and get that quick summary overview of what's been worked on. It's a good tactical way to do that. Now, there's some things like 15.5 and Lattice that'll do that broader, but you don't have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to bring that kind of system and concept in. The other one, really tactical, there's a few companies that do this, but I typically use one called Fellow that does some of the task management, project management things, but I don't actually like it for that because it doesn't fully do what Asana or Trello does. But it's basically, it brings in Google Docs for every meeting on your calendar and your team's calendar. And so if you and I have a weekly one-on-one or we have a team meeting, then that agenda is basically a Google Doc that's created in Fellow that anybody can go and add items to. And you can structure it differently for every meeting and whatnot. And what I love for that is it does take training, but you force everybody in the team to say, look, when you have ideas that come up, and this is really good for the remote teams where people are hesitant to hit Slack, or they'll just hit Slack for anything where it's like, don't disturb my Zen sometimes. And so when there's something that they want to talk about, and they know that we have a shared agenda in Fellow that's going to come into our calendar, well, they just get it out of their mind and they go add it to the calendar, and they know that it's going to be covered when we come to that meeting. And I love that for myself as well, because so often I'll want to ask for an update on something, so I'll just go add it to that team meeting next week. And sometimes when I go through the day before and I go review that, well, things have already been answered either in the agenda, because you can go and kind of do threaded comments, or, well, I got out of my mind. My hesitance would have been, I would have come in and micromanaged before and said, hey, what are you doing here? Instead, I add it to the agenda, and just by the nature of your job, you've already answered in part of the job. Then I go, oh, I need to back off a little bit because you were going to answer that to me already.
Yeah, and that is a good one, because I know that is one of the places where I struggle. Is there are sometimes I'll be working on something and have this moment of like, OMG, I don't know what's happening related to this. Is it moving? Is it not? And I'll have like this moment of panic. And then I'm like, okay, what's going on with this? What's going on with that? I don't see this. I don't see that. And I do have to like curb those moments, because I have recognized that when I go into that panic, it sends my team into a tizzy, and 9 times out of 10, they were already on it, but it's somewhere I didn't look, or, whatever. It's just, I'm not having the visibility. And usually it is like, they'll come back and they're like, do. And I'm like, oh, I can calm down now. And so, it's like that is one of those things that can be challenging, especially like, I think I go up and down between the leadership at the 30,000 foot level to like getting my hands into the weeds, and that generally triggers it.
Yeah, I mean, I have that vacillation as well. It's one of the areas where I found that, especially as I'm developing the direct reports to me, if I have a mid-size or especially when I've had very large teams, one of the best ways for coaching them is telling them how I'm feeling, but giving them the very strict deadlines that says, hey, I expect, like, here's the dates and the times that I expect things to happen. And I don't want to come and ask you if we're off track. If we're going to be off track, like, here's the date, you own it. And if at any time you feel like we're skewing away from that by more than like 2% or 5%, your job is to come and raise that to me. And almost giving them the empowerment that says, you have such extreme ownership of this. If things get off track and I don't know about it, that's kind of your butt on the line. We're going to have a real discussion on that. And you may get it wrong at times, and you may come to me too much with things and go like, hey, every time something shifts by just a tiny little bit, okay, let's back off a little bit. But I find that's one of the best conversation topics with my direct reports is tell them how I'm feeling and give them extreme ownership of meeting those outcomes, and tell them more about the outcomes and the dates for, like, does it matter when a drip campaign gets set up? Well, unless you have a holiday like coming up, probably not. Like, if something shifts a couple of days, but I can still give them my expectations and say, hey, look, I give this to, this is yours to make sure it happens. Tell me if I need to care about it. And so when I was at EXP World Holdings that owns EXP Realty, the largest real estate brokerage in the country, I hired a non-marketer into my marketing team. And he was a great business development guy beforehand. His job was to be my operations manager. So almost like a COO in a company. His entire job was to say, look, here's all the SOPs. Here's everything that runs Scott the way that I intend it to be. And he was like, I don't know marketing. I said, but you know how to follow things. That's why we were so good in business development. So your job is to run my factory so that I can go off with a small portion of the team and mad scientist the next things and not have to worry about the factory. You're my foreman. And when one of the manufacturing lines goes awry, you come and tell me. And I don't ever want to have to know that a factory machine is smoking. That's your job. And he was exceptional on it.
And I think that is, one thing that I take away from what you're saying there, it is defining the swim lane and the expectations and what success looks like. And I think that is something I would say is probably not happening well in a lot of companies. And I'd say it's worse on both ends. Like the really small companies tend to have no structure and no clarity. And the really big companies tend to have like the job description and some things that are in their, massive HR system. But I think that really like that level of clarity of like, not just this is your job description, but that level of clarity in terms of like, this is really what success looks like in this role at that really tangible level, then enables that person to have that litmus test of, am I meeting that or not? And how do I prioritize my time? And, all these sorts of things, because you are essentially giving them that North Star.
Right. Yep.
And so one of my favorite questions that I always like to ask, because I think I learned just as much hosting Revenue Rehab as my guests do, is I don't know what I don't know. So is there anything that I have not thought to ask you about in being a servant leader and how, leading your teams in that way can help to drive performance of the business? Any other advice or thoughts that I haven't thought to ask about?
It's the one thing that with that is I kind of touched on it, but I actually every single day, and often I'll do it in the morning kind of when I brush my teeth, but I go through this exercise to ask myself, what are the three things, because it forces you to not just be one. What are the three things that I'm probably, or I could be potentially wrong about, like fundamentally wrong in my business today? And I know that there's always more than one, because any of us that have been in roles like you have and I've had, and those that are listening, like things come up on an annual basis that you and your team have been doing for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. And it's not just that like things shift. Maybe I was wrong on a content strategy a little bit or some branding, but things that were fundamentally just wrong decisions that you felt was right at the time. And like none of us intend to make wrong decisions. But I'm keenly aware of that wrong decision feels just like a right decision until the data comes out. And so I go in this little habit every day. And then with some of my teams, I'll bring this in as well, because they need to be part of this, because I'm wanting them to voice just a gut feeling. To your point about like swim lanes, part of a swim lane for me is also like, hey, you might see things that could be going awry in another part of the organization. You don't have the communication there. You can't fully articulate it. So how do we just bring that out of you? Because like I can share that with my peers, or maybe it's something with me, and just like help me figure out what could I be wrong about. And so that's something you can do by yourself, but also something that you can do with your team. And in some cases, like I've had a couple people, and it's a personality thing. I have to actually put that question on our weekly one-on-ones, or I won't ask it.
Mm. And so that is a great one. And that may end up being our one thing. It brings me to my last question. Talking about our challenges is just the first step, and nothing changes if nothing changes. And so in traditional therapy, the therapist gives the client some homework, but here at Revenue Rehab, we like to flip that on its head and ask you to give us some homework. And so, so often I will listen to podcasts or read books or, whatever, and not really like feel all jazzed about making a change, see that there's a need, but not know where to start. So I always like to give the one thing. What is the one action that you would recommend for our listeners who recognize that they need to do better at adopting a servant leadership approach?
Yeah, great question. So this is something that cuts me pretty hard, because I have to fight against this myself. You talk to my wife or anybody that works for me, I'll tell everybody to go take vacation, and I don't. And when I really kind of come back to it, it is that I think the one thing is, are you a servant leader or are you an authoritative leader? What do you think would happen to your team if you just didn't show up to work for the next 4 weeks? You can pick 8 weeks if you need to, but just didn't show up for the next 4 weeks. If you're not confident that that the people reporting to you could make enough decisions to keep things at least pretty much status quo or not continue improving them, you're an authoritative leader. And that doesn't, it would, because it could be that you have more junior people and you need to coach them more and train them to be better at their roles and give them more authority. But if you're uncomfortable with just disappearing tomorrow or planning ahead to be gone for the next 4 weeks, not that you have to do it, then there's something underlying with how you're trusting or not trusting your team, how you're not developing them. So if you ask yourself that question and you start to freak out, as I often do, then your tactical thing is to say, okay, what do I need to do different in how I work with my team over the next 6 months? So when I ask myself this question again in 6 months, and you should put it on your calendar, because if it's not on your calendar, you won't do it and you won't take the actions. And then if you felt uncomfortable asking that question, go put it on your calendar now. That says forces yourself for an hour to think about it in 6 months and 1 day, and then start making some changes today.
I love that, because I can say, like, I have gotten to when I take vacation, I no longer travel with my computer. And, occasionally I'll check in an email in the mornings just to, make sure if anybody needs any immediate something. But generally speaking, when I'm on vacation, I am on vacation. And it is such a powerful thing to not be on vacation worried about what's happening in the office, and to not come back and, feel like overwhelmed because, nothing could move without you. Like, to just know that things continued, you get your updates, but in general, business kept businessing while you were away. And like, that is so powerful for mental health, self-care, not getting burnout, all those sorts of things. So it is also self-serving to be a servant leader.
Absolutely. And by all means, I hope some of the people that are listening have developed like my lifestyle. Like, do I need to take vacation? I have a life that I love what I do work-wise. My wife and I own a large mountain property. And so when we want to go work for our mountain property, because of Starlink, we go work for the mountain property and take the kids. So it's like, do I need to take 2 weeks or 3 weeks to enjoy myself? No. But should I be able to if I just, or something comes up, sickness in the family? So that's the question for it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Kurt, I have enjoyed our discussion, but that's our time for today. But before we go, tell our audience how they can connect with you.
So my personal website at kurtuhlir.com is the best way to kind of see some of my writings, get splintered off to LinkedIn or anywhere. And the other place would be the company I'm most excited about that I'm working with right now is in the home search space. And so it's easyhomesearch.com. And so most people don't realize that it makes over $1 billion selling your private information. And so we're taking a different approach to that to keep people's information confidential. And so that's kind of what I'm most excited about right now.
Very interesting. Well, we will make sure to link to your website. So wherever you are listening or watching this podcast, check the show notes and you'll be able to connect with Kurt. Well, Kurt, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome. And thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kurt. I can't believe we're at the end. I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Revenue Rehab with your host, Brandi Starr. Your session is now over, but the learning has just begun. Join our mailing list and catch up on all our shows at revenuerehab.live. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at Revenue Rehab. This concludes this week's session. We'll see you next week.